What's up? Today we're gonna go over a legendary game of Bobby Fischer where he revealed the best opening for white against beginner to intermediate level players. Fischer was playing white and this game was played in a simul on 10 boards. And here's what I love about these games especially. It's kind of like if you could ask Fischer, like, Bobby, what do you think is the best opening for me to play against my level of opponents? And he tells you, like, here is the opening. And he played the Evans Gambit. Now, while dealing with lower rated players, usually you just want to attack them. Like, players below 1800 are usually not good with defending themselves, really. So just going hard with the all-in attack is often a good scenario. Now, b4, the Evans Gambit, is also actually a pretty good way of attacking. Even Stockfish kind of confirms that the opening is good and it's not really against it. Now, for now, we obviously attack the bishop. We're also aiming to push the pawn forward and chase the knight, therefore they're gonna take it. We play pawn c3, so we got one extra tempo for our development. Those who are not familiar with the Evans Gambit often retreat with their bishop back to c5, which is actually wrong because that would give white one more tempo for playing d4 and occupying the center. So bishop c5 is wrong. In the game, black played bishop e7, returning the bishop to safety. Theory considers bishop a5 to be the main move, but we're not going to dive too deeply into it. I've got another video about the Evans Gambit, which you may check later if you're curious about the theory. And for now, I just want you to learn this overall style of play, the right plan, and the common ideas of the Evans Gambit. Black played back bishop e7, now white goes d4, grabbing the center, and black played d6. If black ever takes on d4 instead, well then white could just recapture and then black always has to deal with this central advancement which would push away their knights. Plus there is one more idea which white actually executed into the game even after pawn to d6. Here white traded on e5, black tried to trade some material, but after that of course we're not going to trade queens. We're down a pawn, we want to attack, we don't want to go into an endgame. And the very common way of attacking black in the Evans Gambit is targeting the weakest square, the most vulnerable square, generally speaking, early in the game is the square f7, and we've got our bishop targeting this square as well. And the traditional way in the Evans Gambit is playing queen b3, and in this position it would also be quite nice. There is no convenient way for black to guard this pawn. It can't move forward because then it would expose the knight, and therefore black is already a little bit in trouble. In the game, however, Fischer played an even stronger move. He played queen h5, because from here not only we hit this pawn, but also the pawn on e5. And after g6, which is forced, now queen takes e5, also hits the rook in the corner of the board. Black needs to cover it somehow. They can't move the bishop for that purpose, because the bishop is pinned down to the king. Therefore, he played knight f6. And here Fischer played another nice move. Although white managed to got back their sacrificed pawn and now the material balance is equal, of course we do want to continue our attack. Now black, on the other hand, just wants to castle, and we want to stop that. Now one way of going about this would be playing bishop h6 to take control over this square so that black cannot castle. However, that would allow black to counter with queen to d6, trying to trade off queens and go to an endgame. That is why Fischer played bishop a3. Now that puts pressure to this pinned bishop, making it impossible for black to castle away. That would lose the bishop, but also it controls this d6 square, therefore the queen can no longer go there because we will be attacking him and simply capturing the queen. So after bishop a3, just a few moves in the game, you can see that black is already quite in trouble. It's not even easy for them to move at all. If this bishop is pinned, the king cannot move away because the bishop will be lost. This knight is also pinned down to the rook, therefore the knight can also not move. The queen has to guard the bishop, otherwise we will capture it. And if black tries to move the king out of this pin, it walks right into the other pin, and that would also blunder this knight, this time because of the diagonal pin, and black would be unable to recapture, so white grabs the knight and hits the rook in the corner. So it's pretty easy for white to actually develop the attack here just because black can hardly move. Anyway, black played rook f8, removing the rook from this pin, therefore making it possible for the knight to move on the next turn. White castled and black played knight g4. He wants to kick away this queen so that he can somehow untangle his position. And the queen returned back to g3. Now black trades here on a3 and plays queen e7. And that is actually an interesting position, that although black got stuck with this centralized king, it's still not that easy for white to decide how to attack here. I'm pretty sure that most of the players would probably play knight to b5, just because this knight is actually attacked and white needs to do something about that anyway. Plus knight b5 aims to capture on c7 thanks to our queen supporting this attack, and looks like it's pretty good. But in reality, it's not all that strong, because black can cover the diagonal by going knight e5, at the same time hitting the bishop, and on the next move he wants to chase away this knight, let's say with a6 or c6, and therefore it's not all that easy for white to continue his attack. Fischer instead played a mysterious move, bishop b5 check, and I'm saying that it is a mysterious move because at first it looks like black can just cover and push the bishop back, and then it makes no sense. However, Fischer just induced the pawn to move forward and to weaken the square d6, and now he's going knight c4, taking aim at this square. He wants to go knight d6 check and begin his attack. Now, black didn't take the bishop in the game. Why? Because if he did so, then after knight d6 it forces the king to go out on this really dangerous walk, and after king d8 Fischer would probably play something like rook d1, and now black is indeed in trouble. Now we're attacking them along the d-file. It can never go here because of this x-ray attack, and it kind of looks like black is disorganized and under this massive attack already. In the game, black actually found a number of pretty good moves. He played queen e6, and it's quite a nice defense. The idea here would be that after knight d6, the king is no longer forced to go to an open d-file, but instead the king would stay to an e-file and would go forward with king to e7, and now it's still not all that easy for white to somehow find the way to attack, also given the fact that the bishop is hanging, the knight is hanging, and white needs to do something. Now, Fischer played another interesting and unusual move. Instead of doing anything about these minor pieces, he just brought the rook to an open file. Now, bringing the rook to an open file normally is a very standard move, but in this case, of course, things are much more complicated, because white is actually sacrificing the bishop right here. Now, perhaps black counted for the move knight to d6 check, and he was ready to move the king forward and still to be in the battle. But Fischer tossed in this in-between move queen to c7, and that was the point of having the rook right here, now that we're threatening all of a sudden back rank mate with rook to d8 or queen to d8. And that allows white to include the queen into the attack with a tempo, like played bishop d7 to cover up the d-file, but now knight to d6 attacks the king goes here. And that brings us to another interesting position, where yes, white kind of exposed the king, but still, black is doing quite fine, and it's not easy for white to find any other way to attack. Black is ready to play something like rook c8, maybe even to sacrifice back a part of his extra material and to get away, ended up still with extra material. So Fischer played another brilliant move, this time knight f5. He's sacrificing the knight just to open the e-file. That is check to the king, therefore black can't ignore it. And in the game they took it. Another funny variation would be if black just tried to return back to e8. Then there is this sneaky fork with knight to g7. And if someone looks at the game right at this point, they would probably wonder how the heck could the knight appear right here on g7 instead of the black fianchettoed bishop. That seems to be the right piece to stand there on g7. Also in this position, black can't move the king forward because then rook d6 would pin the queen and white would continue their attack, but also grab the queen. That explains why black has to accept this sacrifice, but the position remains to be very tricky and interesting. Actually, this game was included by Fischer into his famous book, My 60 Memorable Games, which goes to show that Fischer really enjoyed this game, and he truly played it in style of Mikhail Tal or old masters who were willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of a beautiful attack. Now, black played rook c8. Really nice counter-attacking move. Again, we gotta give credit to the black player. Being an amateur player, he found a lot of interesting moves here. What's the problem with just taking this pawn? Well, the whole point of sacrificing the knight on f5 was just to open this e-file for the white rook to attack, and queen f5 would allow white to execute this attack. It's actually even better for white not to play rook e1, letting the king possibly to escape, but to start with queen to d6, shutting down all the routes where the king could possibly try to escape. Now the king is attacked, it also has to guard this rook on f8. If the king goes back, now white can take advantage of this open file, black has to cover, and there is this nice checkmate taking advantage of the queen. In the game, black found a nice counter blow, rook to c8. So white can capture this queen, but black will in return capture the white queen on c7. Also, let's not forget that black currently is up 2 minor pieces, therefore it's really critical for white to deliver his attack successfully. If not, he's going to lose the game. And what's nice here is that there is only one move that wins the game here for white, and any other move actually just loses the game. So you can try to think about that yourself and find that winning sequence. Also, what's interesting is that Judith Fischer including this game into his book, we also know what Fischer was thinking about. And here he played rook takes d7, and that is that winning shot that white had to find. Now, queen takes, and Fischer wrote in his book that originally he played to play rook e1 check, and the variation after that is also pretty cool. Now black can't just move the king away because that would drop the queen, and then white would have material advantage and continue his attack. But black has another beautiful counter trick, knight to e5. And the point of this sacrifice is to lure the rook onto this e5 square, so that after king f6, although white can capture the queen, but black in return can capture the rook. And so now we end up with queen versus two rooks, which normally is a material balance. But what's the problem for black is that white also got two extra pawns at his check, and white should be able to win this endgame. Although it's not completely winning here for white, black still can put up a lot of resistance. Fischer wrote in the book that initially he was planning to go for that endgame, but then he recalled Lasker's rule, which states if you see a good move, look for a better one. He tried to think harder, and then he realized that there is another great move, pawn f6, where I just can't stop sacrificing something in this game. Now, what's the beauty of that move? Well, the king still cannot move away because of queen takes d7. But how about knight takes f6? Well, it creates that really unusual position where after rook e1, the black pieces just somehow stand on the way of each other. They can't move normally. And black has a significant material advantage, but somehow the position is just so awkward that they can't do anything. In fact, the only legal move for black here to play is knight e4, giving the knight back. But now after rook takes e4, our rook is on e4, not on e5. And that little detail makes a big difference. Now after the king moves, now we take this queen on d7, and the king can now recapture the rook on e5, well, because the rook is not there, which means that now we've got a rook versus a queen for white, and therefore that's easily winning. Still black played rook to d8, and here what's interesting is that Fischer played queen g4. I'm not really sure why. It's pretty clear that white can keep attacking the king with either rook f4 or queen e7, and that should probably result in a quick checkmate. Fischer played queen g4. I guess it was more of a psychological reason. He just wanted to show for his opponent, like, hey bro, if you were hoping me to blunder the back rank make, like, it's not gonna happen, you know? I'm seeing it, and black actually resigned. If you want to know how Fischer prevented blunders in his games, check out this video. I reveal there a single rule that Fischer has always followed in order to eliminate blunders and to make his game very consistent. And I'm sure it's going to be extremely helpful, so check this out.